The year is 2026. You're sure of that. It is printed on your phone, your driver's license, your money. But here's something strange. You have never counted the years yourself. Nobody alive has. Think about what that number actually claims. It claims that 2,026 years have passed one by one since a fixed starting point. It claims that someone watched every single one of those years go by and kept the tally without ever slipping. Who was the counter? Who checked the math? The reason you never ask is simple. You inherited the number. Your parents handed it to you, and their parents handed it to them, a chain of copies stretching back into the dark. You trust the chain because everyone trusts the chain. The year is just a rumor that everyone agrees on. Now, what if the rumor was wrong? In 1991, a German historian named Heribert Illig stood up and said something insane. He said the chain had been tampered with. He said that roughly 300 years of history never happened at all. Not misremembered, not poorly documented, invented. According to him, the years 614 to 911 were paper years, written into the record by people who never lived through them. Because nobody lived through them. His theory has a name, the phantom time hypothesis. And if he was right, you are not living in 2026. You're living somewhere around 1729. You might think no serious person could believe this, but wait until you hear the evidence, because some of it is real, and that is exactly what makes this story dangerous. Where would you even hide 300 years? Inside the one place nobody looks, the early Middle Ages, the stretch historians themselves nicknamed the Dark Ages, because the record goes quiet. Fewer buildings, fewer documents, whole regions of Europe where archaeologists dig down through the centuries and find a layer that is strangely thin, almost empty, as if time itself skipped a beat. And standing in the middle of that quiet stretch is one enormous figure. Charlemagne, the great emperor, the father of Europe, a man so perfect, so productive, so legendary that Illig asked an uncomfortable question. What if he was fiction? What if Charlemagne was not a king, but a character, written into the gap to give the fake centuries a hero? Why would anyone do this? Illig had an answer for that too. Follow the men who controlled the calendar. Around the real year 700, three powerful men wanted the numbers to be bigger. Otto III, Holy Roman Emperor, Pope Sylvester II, the most learned man of his age, and the Byzantine Emperor Constantine VII. According to the theory, Otto wanted to rule in the year 1000, the millennium, the year of destiny, because a king who reigns at the turn of the 1000th year sits closer to God. So the record keepers simply moved the date. They slid the world forward 3 centuries, and they papered over the seam with invented kings, invented battles, invented saints. How do you fake 300 years? You do not need a time machine. You need a scriptorium. You need monks, ink, and patience. Every chronicle from that era was copied by hand in candlelit rooms by men working for the same institutions that owned the calendar. Change the copies and you change the past. And here's the fact that should genuinely bother you. Medieval forgery was not rare. It was an industry. Monasteries forged charters to claim land. Kingdoms forged genealogies to claim thrones. The church forged documents to claim empires. This part is not a conspiracy theory. This is accepted mainstream history. Some scholars estimate that an enormous share of surviving early medieval documents are fake or doctored. The people who wrote your history were provably willing to lie. Then came the detail that made the theory famous. The calendar itself seemed to confess. In 1582, Pope Gregory XIII fixed the calendar. The old Julian system ran slightly long, drifting off the sun by about one day every 128 years. By Gregory's time, the drift had to be corrected, so he deleted days from October. And you can still see the scar. If you have an Apple device, pull it out right now. Open the calendar app and scroll back. Keep going, past your birthday, past every war you learned in school, all the way to October 1582. Look closely. October 4th, jump straight to October 15th. The 5th through the 14th do not exist. 10 days, deleted from time, still missing from the device in your hand 4.5 centuries later. Now, do the math yourself. If the Julian calendar had been running since Julius Caesar, more than 1,600 years of drift should have piled up about 13 missing days. Gregory deleted 10. 10? Not 13. 3 days short. 3 days of drift that should exist and do not. Now remember the drift rate. The calendar slips one day every 128 years. So 3 missing days of drift means roughly 3 missing centuries of calendar. The exact size of the phantom gap. When Illig's supporters found that, it felt like catching history red-handed. So, is your calendar lying to you? This is where the story turns, because the first half of this tale belongs to the conspiracy. The second half belongs to the evidence. And the evidence does something beautiful. It turns out time leaves fingerprints, not in books where kings and monks can reach, in places no forger can touch. Start with the trees. Every year, a tree grows one new ring. Good years make thick rings, dry years make thin ones. So the inside of a tree is basically a diary of the weather, one ring per year. And because no two stretches of weather are ever identical, the pattern of thick and thin rings becomes a fingerprint for those exact years. Scientists realized they could match those fingerprints between trees, a living tree and an old dead one that overlapped in time show the same pattern in their shared years. Link the dead tree to an even older beam from a ruin. Link that beam to ancient logs preserved in bogs. How far back can the chain go? A researcher named Mike Bailey at Queen's University Belfast helped connect oak rings into one continuous chain reaching back thousands of years, ring by ring, year by year. A count kept by living things that cannot read, cannot write, and cannot be bribed. And when you count the rings, the answer is simple. There is no missing block of 300 years. The count runs straight through the phantom centuries without a gap. Then look up. In the year 837, Halley's Comet made the closest pass to Earth in its recorded history. It hung in the sky like a second moon with a tail. Astronomers in Tang Dynasty China logged it night after night. Its position, its brightness, its slow crawl across the constellations. That is supposed to be a phantom year, a year that never happened. So, who is writing down the comet? Because here's the problem the theory cannot escape. Europe was not the only place keeping time. Chinese court astronomers never stopped observing. The Islamic world, born in exactly those supposedly fake centuries, kept its own calendar, its own records, its own astronomy, completely independent of any pope. For the theory to work, Otto's little conspiracy needed partners. Baghdad, Constantinople, and the Tang court would all have to join a lie invented in Germany, coordinating their fake records to the same fake dates, with no telephones, across 10,000 kilometers. What are the odds of that? And the sky itself keeps receipts. Eclipses are pure physics. You can run the solar system backward like a film. Astronomers such as Fred Espenak, who spent his career at NASA computing eclipse catalogs, can tell you the exact date and path of every eclipse for the past 5,000 years. When you check ancient eclipse reports against the math, they land where the standard timeline says they should. If 300 ghost years were stuffed into the count, every ancient eclipse would miss its date by 3 centuries. None of them do. Those missing 3 days in Gregory's correction. It sounds devastating until you learn one boring detail. Gregory was not restoring the calendar to Julius Caesar's time. He was restoring it to the Council of Nicaea in the year 325, the moment the church fixed the rules for Easter. Run the drift from 325 instead of from Caesar, and the required correction is 10 days. Exactly 10. The smoking gun fires blanks. So, the phantom centuries are not phantom. The count is real. Charlemagne, by every physical measure, existed in a real year that really happened. But before you relax, sit with the strangest part. The part Illig accidentally got right. He was right that you take the date on pure faith. He was right that the written past is a copy of a copy, made by interested men. He was right that forgery was everywhere, that some of the documents in your history books are lies, and that historians know it. A scholar named Lorenzo Valla proved it back in 1440 when he dissected the donation of Constantine, the document the church used to justify its earthly power, and showed from its grammar alone that it was written centuries after its supposed date. A fake. One of the most important documents in European history. Fake. But notice who caught it. A historian. Notice who exposed the forged charters. Historians. Notice why you know medieval monks doctored records at all. Because the same discipline the conspiracy accuses is the discipline that told you. History is not a recording. It is a crime scene investigation, running for centuries, checking the testimony of documents against witnesses that cannot lie. Wood, ice, carbon, the sky. The reason this is because knowledge does not come from trust, it comes from cross-examination. And now the modern mirror. You still take almost every date on faith. Your phone asks a server for the time. The server asks an atomic clock, and you believe the glowing number the same way a medieval peasant believed a church bell. You have simply swapped priests. Your own memory does the same thing, quietly editing your personal timeline, stretching good summers, deleting empty months, forging little charters of its own so the story of you reads better. Somewhere in your past are phantom years too. Years that happened but left no rings. So, no, history is not missing 300 years. It only felt that way to a man who noticed correctly that the past is something you have to take someone's word for. The year is 2026. You're still sure of that, but now you know why you were sure. Not because kings kept an honest tally, not because the chain of copies never lied, because the trees were counting the whole time, and the sky kept the receipts, and no one has ever managed to forge an eclipse. You never counted the years yourself. It turns out something else did.